everybody, welcome to another drive-through board game blog. This is now the 1000th video on my YouTube channel, which is kind of cool, but also differently freaky in some ways, because there's 1,000 videos. I didn't really think that I would get to 1,000. In the back of my head when I started, I figured maybe one day you'll get to like 500 videos and then you'll be done, and then, you would move on and do something else. But things happen and life comes at you in different ways, and this is a good release for me. It's a different hobby doing the videos compared to playing the games, but obviously they kind of complement each other, back and forth. So I gotta be honest with you, it's a really good escape, especially from just insanity that happens in life and in the world and personal life and the global life and all that stuff. And so just to be sort of sentimental for just a second before I get into my top 5 list, I just want to be encouraging. I want to always try to be, sometimes I will screw up, but I always want to be encouraging to folks to keep playing games. I know it sounds silly. You are, and I am, and everybody is in a place of vast privilege, and they're super lucky to be able to play games on a regular basis or at all, because there's people on this planet that don't have access to board games. They don't know about board games. They don't have access to a lot of things. Board games is maybe the least of their worries, but if you're in a position that you can play games regularly or semi-regularly, you're in a good shape. Probably. I think it's good and it's healthy. It's a great hobby. It is a little consumerist based. A lot of people want to chase the new stuff. That's okay, because that keeps the game publishers in business, and they also, I imagine, are doing good for themselves and their soul by investing in the creation, the manufacturing of the games. And, I know that they get joy when they see somebody else enjoying their games or reviewing a game favorably and stuff like that. So anyway, just keep doing it. It's always fun. Try to be positive, try to give good feedback. And let's move into the top 5 games of my lifetime. Now, I think a year or so ago, I did a similar list, the top 5 games of my lifetime. These are not like my favorite games, my top 5 games of all time. And before, I talked about a lot of games that kind of, sort of led up to me making videos, so to speak. And they were in that time frame. And I'll have a link to that video underneath here, so you can go back and watch that. But this is sort of like the next 5. Like I said, life kind of comes at you different ways, and sort of enthusiasm happens in spots that you don't always anticipate. At least I don't always anticipate. I went to school to be an art educator, and now I am a software engineer, which has its pros and its cons. I do work for a corporation, which is a good corporation, as corporations go, but it's a little different than teaching young folks art and to appreciate art as well. So there's a little bit I miss out, but there's also some things that I've certainly gained from that. And I think that's sort of, if you kind of keep that in the abstract, as kind of the theme with this list. So let's go into the number 5 game, and the order is just kind of weird with this, but these are games that really have had a profound effect on me beyond, is it a good game? Is it, well balanced mechanically? Is the theme sound and all that stuff? Although I think for all of these, you could apply both of those standards and it would succeed. So number 5 is Freedom, the Underground Railroad. And this is a game that still puts the hairs on my body up when I think about playing it, when I think about the subject matter. Now, this is a game about the Underground Railroad just prior to the Civil War, right around that time period when they were trying to abolish slavery in the United States. So that is, slavery is, there's a lot of horrific crimes that can happen in this world, and slavery is one of the most, if not the most horrific thing that you can do to another individual, especially a large group of individuals, and especially as a nation state kind of thing. And folks that worked hard to alleviate that and fight that and thwart that is massive. I mean, it's a spiritual and religious, in a sense, the amount of commitment and drive and passion and all of those kinds of things that people did, and the lack of fear. I'm sure they were afraid, but fighting that fear to stop that kind of thing. All of that is super obvious, but making a board game about that is very, very interesting, because in a sense you are tackling this horror, cooperatively in this case, to try to thwart that. And woven through the game is all of this history. There's cards and people, and there's a map and stuff, and you're routing them through the south, up into the north, and eventually up into Canada, where they can eventually at that time finally be free folks. So when you put yourself in a position of being proactive, and you have you're exerting your will into making this story happen, it's much different than like watching a movie about slavery or about that time period. There you're being told, you're recognizing, you're empathizing with what's happening, but here you're making decisions, and you're putting, they're little cubes in the case of the game, but you're putting their life in your own hands in a way, and there's like a certain sort of almost overwhelming responsibility there, but it's also sort of a duality, because it's sort of like, this is just a game, this is not real, I'm not really actually doing this good thing that I'm doing in the game. I'm just sort of exercising and practicing doing a good thing, which a lot of games are about. A lot of times games can be about practicing before real life kind of stuff. So that's just, it just blows me away that somebody was able to so effectively craft a game about such, obviously a sensitive topic, and in such a way that engaged me and I think a lot of other folks. And I would just love to see, folks really attack these kinds of subjects. And I know it's tricky, because you have to be very sensitive that you're not just like exploiting that situation or that historical event to say, hey, look at me, look, I'm doing really good here by, witnessing that, but really focus and be as selfless and sacrificial in some ways to turn the lens and turn the focus on the event, and put the players in a position where they're able to then turn the lens and focus on the different event, and sort of over empathize with that happening, and taking people out of places where because I live in the 2000s, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and as I've gotten older, I can empathize more. As you're a child, you kind of think everything is how it is because of where you're at. I think somebody wise told me that once a long time ago. And if you grow up in Africa, you think everything is like Africa. If you grow up in Southern California, you think everything's just kind of like that. And then, everywhere else. So taking people out of their sort of quote unquote comfort zone and doing that kind of thing is really cool. So that's Freedom Underground Railroad. Definitely a game that isn't certainly fun and laugh-inducing, but is very engaging, very intriguing, and I think worth definitely a couple of plays from anybody that can get their hands on it. Now, moving on to something a little bit lighter here, is number 4, and that is Combat Commander Europe. And this is a sort of traditional World War II tactical squad level game. Each side will take on a little squad of soldiers, and you'll play out these different scenarios and things. Now, the difference between this one and a few of the others that I have played is this one is very cinematic and very, very narrative in nature. It's very random and a bit chaotic as well, but it also feels like a natural, organic flow of these kind of hectic situations, more than I think, for me, any of these other style of games. A lot of these games can be a little bit stodgy, a little bit stiff, a little bit rigid. And but this one really is very, very simple. It's just foot soldiers. There's no tanks or even anything like that. But that kind of stuff sort of exists beyond. So this one, it kind of reminds me of Up Front in a way, which is an old card game, which I also recommend. But it kind of really puts you in the mindset of being in that person that's on the ground, your feet are in the mud sort of thing, and all of the sort of confluence of events and the way the cards work and the way that, like grenades can bounce around and fall back on you and blow up in your face. And that's kind of stuff that totally does happen in war, because war certainly does not go as planned, especially when you get to like the micro individual level. A lot of these other games are more epic in scope, especially as you blow up to like a theater level where you're just pushing like one shit, and that's 3,000 people, So that's a little bit more different idea. And this is, in terms of that low-level infantry type of thing, this to me is the best and the most engrossing. And the mechanics and stuff are really fun, and the card play and the card management and all that kind of stuff is really, really cool too. So this one kind of goes in and out of print, but you can certainly find it relatively readily available. If not, wait a couple of months, then it'll come back into print and be more available. So that was Combat Commander Europe, although there are other Combat Commanders Pacific and Mediterranean and other ones that I haven't actually played yet. So that's number 4. And then number 3 is Dead of Winter, specifically Dead of Winter Long Night, because this one is, again, a lot of these are very narrative in focus, and I think that's one of the things that really will plant kind of that memory, at least for me, in with a lot of games. And when they added the Long Night expansion, they expanded on the Crossroads cards. They also expanded on some of the mechanics and things that you can do. It made it a little more science fiction-y, because the base Dead of Winter was just zombies, and you're kind of Walking Dead vibe. But with the others, they get like mutants, and you have bandits that come around and harass you, and all stuff like that. And this one, a couple of things. It's nice because you can also play co-op, which is something that I can do with my son, because we can't really do like the whole betrayer thing. My wife's not interested in playing Dead of Winter, nor my parents. But playing a co-op, we can still play the game and go through the Crossroads cards and all that kind of cool stuff. And it's just the two of us, and we kind of play through. And the co-op is much stronger once you add the expansion, because you have ways that you can kind of tweak the difficulty, and where you can kind of just spice up, the game a little bit more. The base game kind of relies on that betrayer type of mechanic, where it's kind of plain in terms of just a co-op. But when you add the expansion stuff and some of the modules, there's enough going on that you can play co-op. But also the Crossroads cards are all over the place. There's some that are very traumatic, and some that are very real feeling, and you're like, oh wow, I'm making a really tough decision. And some of the decisions are tough, but when you look at it in a game terms, you're like, oh well, it's not that tough. I know it's horrible, but we're going to do this anyway. But I'm always like, no, man, I don't care. Like, I have to live with myself for making this decision, and I don't want to do that. I don't care if I lose this game. This is crazy. So it kind of triggers some of those real life events that maybe you can empathize with, and a lot of them are very silly and funny too, which is also kind of cool. So it adds, kind of the point of this one is, it adds those different levels of emotion to the game, sort of, I don't know if you call it fear, but there's a certain sort of, I don't know, there's a shock value to some of it, and there's also a humor value to some of it, but it's not like silly humor, and I don't want to pick on Munchkin, but it's not just like geek humor, it's like, haha, Star Wars versus Star Trek, okay, that's funny, but it's like real humor, a lot of times, and real emotion, and at least getting at the real emotion, which is, again, something you can kind of go back to Freedom here, and even a little bit Combat Commander. That's cool that a game can get at that, because movies and stuff, you can get at that. Music, they get at those more nebulous and very human and important, I think, emotions, and sitting in the nice package of Dead of Winter, which is a fantastically designed game. So I highly recommend picking up the expansion if you don't have it. If you don't have either, you might even just go right for the expansion and then add the base game, which is almost like an expansion to the expansion, because the expansion has all the cool rules and stuff, and then if you just want more like characters and stuff, you can go buy the base game. So you can almost do it in reverse. So that's number 3, Dead of Winter, especially Long Night. Number 2 is One Night Ultimate Werewolf. This one is certainly personal in a way, because we have played the living daylights out of this with my group, and I think this game is really at the point where I feel like the folks in my group weren't just people I was playing games with after this. It was certainly like, I felt like more like we were just friends, because the folks in my game group, I know them through the game group, primarily, and so we've done some things outside the game group together and stuff like that now too. But I feel like this was kind of that game, at least for me, that made me feel like, okay, I'm not just like trying to beat them at Kalis, or we're trying not to collectively beat Eldritch Horror or something. I mean, this is, you're reading other players. You're getting to know Billy and Francesca and Bobby and all those people, and their facial twitches and the little tells that they have. Apparently I have a bunch of tells. but I think that's bull. I think people just say that. All right. Anyway, I do have tells, but you get to know the tells, and through that you get to kind of know the people, and you have the memories of the games that you played before, or the game you just played, and the games you played last week, and you start to get to know the people a little bit more. And so One Night is definitely out of all the social deduction games we've played, we've certainly played One Night way more than all the others. But we do have, as a collectively, not all of us, but we collectively have, an appreciation for that social deduction game. Even the folks that don't like to play the social deduction game, I think just the fact that the game kind of happens during the game night, and other people can at least watch it, or maybe they're playing something else. But it just adds so much just jocularity and all that kind of thing. And, there's a word called fellowship that happens. It's not always in certain circles. Fellowship can happen in many circles. And that kind of attitude occurs with that. And I think that spreads, and it becomes a little bit viral in a sense to other folks that don't even like that. So I think it kind of like loosens up the group and stuff like that. So yeah, I like it. That's been great. So I think that would be my number 2, kind of this profound sort of memory and focus kind of thing. And then number 1 is going to be Frostgrave. I think Frostgrave might replace Kalis. I don't know. I know. But I've really had just a friggin' blast playing this game and building this game and creating the worlds for this game and all of that stuff. It's a game that I didn't know this kind of thing existed, and this is why it's my number 1, because I played some D&D in college. I've done some other kind of role-playing a couple times, not very much at all. I've always enjoyed kind of RPGs on the computer, and I like kind of more role-playing style board games and things with theme and stuff like that. But I don't have a role-playing group now, and I've never really had a very long-lasting role-playing group. I would say as far as groups go, I had a group in college. We played a few times, and then I had kind of an online one we were doing via forum, which we played for a little bit of time, not that long. And then I played kind of some one-shots and things with folks. So maybe if I had like a persistent group like that, and I don't know that I had that much interest to do it, but if I had, all the time in infinity, then I would. But this scratches that itch, but it also scratches that sort of tactical combat, miniature game itch, because I like those style of games. I like those kind of games on the computer where you play like, what am I thinking of? Like StarCraft and, Dawn of War and Final Fantasy Tactics and Fire Emblem, which I've been playing on my phone too much. Those kind of tactical combat things are cool. So you kind of marry those two, the role-playing, the world-building, all that kind of stuff, and then you have a really kind of cool, fun, sort of somewhat tactical game to go along with. And they've really provided a ton of stuff to flesh out your world, and again left it open to sort of the silence for you to kind of fill in your own story. So I've really, really appreciated that. And you can, there's been a lot of reasons that I've gotten more into miniature games over the last year. Certainly Warhammer Quest and playing that. And I think I've always kind of had it in the back of my head, because like I played Imperial Assault and stuff, however long ago, years ago, and the Sentinel Tactics and stuff. I've always liked that style of game. But I think if you were to say, this is the game that really infected my brain and said, oh, okay, this miniature thing, this isn't just some other thing. This is now something you can do, you can be a part of. It's not separate from board games, and that's a whole other conversation. But my narrow focus in life has always been I played some Ameritrash games when I was younger, like Hero Quest and Dragonlance and Buck Rogers and stuff like that. Then when I stopped playing games and went to college and then played games after that, it was all Euro games, because that's what my friends down the street sort of had going on, and that's kind of been the new thing over the last 20 years. And then you kind of get adapted into those Ameritrash games again. But anyway, so this is, I've always kind of felt like that kind of stuff was separate, because you get on like Board Game Geek and all they do is trash Games Workshop, and 80% for good reason until recently, and sort of trash the Ameritrashers a little bit. That's old news, but there's a lot of sort of separation sometimes in the hobby. Some people are really heavy into like train games, and other people like only Euros, and they don't really like fillers, or they don't like Euros. They only like Ameritrash and that kind of stuff. I've never been like that. I've always liked different kinds of movies, and I've liked different kinds of music. I will listen to Public Enemy one breath, and then I will listen to Bob Dylan in the next breath, and then I will listen to Led Zeppelin, and then I will listen to David Bowie and Prince and all those fellas and everybody else. And I will watch a serious movie, and I'll go watch The Avengers. So that's kind of, a lot of times I get asked, like, dude, well, you were supposed to like Kalis, and now you like Warhammer, or you like Frostgrave. That doesn't make sense. It does make sense, and I think certainly I'm definitely not unique in this. And I think the more folks that I've run into now that I've sort of been more, I guess, public about miniature stuff, is you find more people that are like that, like, oh no, dude, I totally play Frostgrave and then Great Western Trail the next day. So that's cool. I'm a little bit sort of I like to travel, if you will. I don't get to travel enough. Like, if I had lots of money, I would be traveling so much to all these different places, and going to these different types of games and traveling to these different worlds really keeps everything fresh for me. So there's going to be times where, I probably played Kalis, let's conclude 2016, maybe 5 times, and that's my favorite game of all time. Maybe not even 5. I mean, I'm rounding up. I know I played at least 3 times. But that doesn't mean it's no longer one of my favorite or my favorite games. It's just like, oh, it goes on the shelf. Are you worthy of staying there? Because I know I'm going to come revisit you in a couple of months. So that's interesting. So having the ability to sort of go and explore these different mechanics and genres and all that stuff, I know I turned into this really pedantry analysis of this, but so Frostgrave kind of just unlocked that whole other world of, I think, the dungeon master side of it, the world building, the hobby side of it, and I think that is something I didn't really appreciate before. I've certainly blinged out Kalis, for example, but that's just stuff that I've either bought secondhand, or I grabbed some stuff, somebody sent me some components and I grabbed it out of that and threw it in there to bling it out. But really sort of flipping the script a little bit and then investing in some of your really favorite stuff and making, sort of enhancing that experience, playing variants, coming up with your own rules and all that stuff. It's more of a participatory sort of cooperative experience with the designer, sort of post-mortem, after the game has been done and published and now is somewhat dead probably to that designer, because they've moved on to the next design. You're still sort of cooperating with them through time, and with the other folks that you play with. And so that is a lot of what gaming is about, I think, is having that ability to say, okay, I don't just have to like play the rules and be such a rules lawyer and all that kind of stuff, even though you want a solid foundation to dovetail off of. You want to be able to feel comfortable with enough of what you know about the game and what the other players at the table know, and be able to spice up the game, add up the game. So I think that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is being able to go in and build that experience and, weave in the story, interject that, and do it in a way that you are doing it, in concert with other players. Talk about One Night Ultimate Werewolf. That's so much player driven. It's not just script driven, and there's improv involved. If you think of a movie, you've got all the production and the script and the acting, and all those bits go together to make the movie. But there's also sometimes some improv and some, there's editing and rewrites, and that kind of stuff happens after. And there's fan films and all that kind of stuff that, sometimes the fan film is better than the actual film. But yeah, so that's what I was kind of getting at there. And so anyway, feeling reflective. This is the 1,000th video that I've made. And so there you go. I'll have some more top 10 lists for folks as well. I know some folks have been asking for some specific ones, like one involving 2011. But this was my 1,000th video, and I said, yeah, let me do this because somebody actually brought it up couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh yeah, you know, I should redo that and see what I think. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the videos. Take care and keep playing games and have fun. Thanks.